Welcome to another appointment with this cycle of video conferences dedicated to tramways and other means of transportation. Tonight we have John Carlson from England. He will talk about an important tram museum, the Beamish Museum. The talk will be made in English, and you will be able to ask questions at the end, but also to use the chat during the presentation. Next presentation will be the last before the summer break, and it will be my turn this time, because I will present the tramway system of Turin, and this will be made in English for the foreign people, also to make some advertisement for the international conference that will take place in December. So I will provide some practical information about it. Also the titles of the presentation that we have collected. We have already 18 presentations coming from all over the world. So anyway, before giving the floor to John, I have to repeat everything in Italian. Buonasera e benvenuti a questa nuova serata del ciclo di videoconferenze dedicate ai tram e agli altri mezzi di trasporto. Questa sera abbiamo dall'Inghilterra John Carlson, che ci parlerà del museo di Beamish, che è un museo tranviario piuttosto importante in Inghilterra. La presentazione sarà fatta in inglese, potrete usare la chat durante la presentazione, fare delle domande in italiano e in inglese alla fine della presentazione. Vi ricordo che la prossima presentazione tra 15 giorni la farò io, sarà dedicata a Torino, sarà in inglese perché sarà dedicata espressamente agli stranieri, anche per pubblicizzare la rete di Torino in vista del convegno internazionale che avrà luogo a dicembre prossimo. Va bene, adesso e con ciò do la parola a John. John, if you want to start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, I shall start sharing my screen. So can everybody see a slide saying the Beamish tramway?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
Well, you should see it in a minute.
Yep.
Are we through? Yes.
Yes, there we are.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So, well, as the title says, this is about the Beamish tramway. But I've also got to say there's someone who is a guest here as well, Paul Jarman. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hello, good evening. I'm Paul Jarman. I'm Director of Development at Beamish, responsible for transport and engineering matters. I started as a transport curator with the museum, but I now cover a whole host of the sites, but principally trams and railways, which are the really interesting bits, but buses, cars, etc., and buildings, I should probably add.
Yes. Yeah. Now, as I was going to say, Paul will know far more about this than I do. So I think Paul will probably take the lead on certain parts. Right. So I think we are ready to start now. If everyone is sitting comfortably, then I'll begin.
This is probably one of the oldest. This is the third oldest building, 1896. One of the nice things about this is that it's still got the original fenestration, the little carved pieces at the top of the crazy beams here.
When the old town has been built at the Beamish Museum, the Gateshead No. 10 electric tram car will run down its main street. The tram, in its heyday, provided cheap mobility for working people. The man could live on one side of his town and work on the other.
John, can you make it louder?
I certainly can. Sorry, I will.
Since its arrival at Beamish,
That's, I think, is the maximum. Are we okay with that?
Let's hear it.
gives the older visitor a trip into nostalgia, while for parties of school kids, it brings history back to life.
No, it's not very loud, John.
This is about the end of it. Don't worry. Right. Okay. So what people often say about Beamish is it's not a museum tramway. It's a tramway in a museum. It does a working job. It's not just there to run old trams on. It actually moves people around the site. And if it wasn't there, for a lot of people, getting around would be much more difficult. Now, there's some facts and figures. I know we tend to like these about the tramway at Beamish. It has 1.5 miles of track laid out in a circle, so it's you can just go around and around and around. It's transported about 1.5 million passengers per year, with an average fleet mileage of about 20,000 miles. The operating fleet is between 4 to 6 trams, with others installed or under maintenance. The Beamish site is 350 other acres. Paul, is that about correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's grown a little as we continue to absorb areas around the museum as part of protecting the museum estate from development that might overlook us and spoil the view. Our annual visitors have just topped 830,000 a year. And it's probably worth mentioning as well, we have a bus fleet that does a similar mileage now as well. So, as John says, it's an integral part of transport around the museum. I think without it, because of the way the landscape is formed, there are people who wouldn't be able to visit if they weren't able to get around with the benefit of the tramway.
Paul, we're getting quite a bit of crackle, I think, coming on through on your, much of it's on your mic.
I
Right.
shall investigate that, and I'll just mute myself for a moment.
Okay. Right. So anyway, we'll crack on, and just to say, things have changed a lot over the years. Now, this one was taken by a photographer called David Packer. This was quite some time ago. That shows a tram. You can see the coaches behind there. That's roughly the site of something called Rowley Station, and this is what it looks like now. So things have changed quite a lot. That's actually is the same tram, which I think has been rebuilt. I think it came to Beamish available as both a lower and a top deck, but a lot of work had to be done on that. That one is the current Sheffield car at Beamish. Right, now just gonna have a look at the route. You can see the site there, and just to kind of click around that, we're going to start there. That is the entrance. People will be coming down here. There's a bus service up about here. There's a car park here. People will usually join about there, where we can see, yeah. And then just to be moving on, yeah, there's the tramway is running around here. The first larger thing is what's often called the town or the old town. There's a main street here, but the Beamish is building a 1950s town here, which I think a lot of it is actually done now. Is that the situation, Paul? Is it done now largely?
It's now complete, yes.
Right, great, and your sound appears to be fine with that. There's also a railway station here. which is the building is actually Rowley Station. Then the route will keep on going. The depot is here. There's a pit town here and a colliery here. And then we're back to the museum. Now, what we're going to do now is just go on a journey around the system. Now, again, Paul, I'm going to start with this, but I'm going to ask you if you can probably take the lead on saying what this place is. Oh, actually. Yeah, here we go. There we go. So that is Beamish. That's at the entrance way. So we're now going to go right the way around the circle. Now you can see again. There's a Sheffield car. There's a Portuguese car on the left there. That's painted in the colours of South Shields Corporation because South Shields is very close to the museum. And here's the car coming up now. I think it's fair to say that this car is one of the higher capacity cars on the system.
Yes, that's one of the trams we try and keep in service at all times, just because it's so useful to us as a people carrier and very popular because of the open balconies. I think it's come up from the depot and it's reversing here in order to go into service on what we call outer circle, which is clockwise.
Right. And we're on the way now. I think we're going down what's called, is it Popolare Bank?
It is.
Popolare Bank. And I think that the bank that we're about to go down is got one of the steepest gradients on the tramway.
Yeah, it's 1 in 16, and it was
Right.
the steepest permissible by the UK Railway Inspectorate when the tramway was being proposed.
Yeah.
We operate with electric train staff on this section as well, because the gradient is such that with the curve, it was felt that it was necessary to not operate on a line of sight principle, but to have some additional protection to make sure 2 trams didn't enter the same section.
Yeah. I believe that if you have 4 cars in operation at the same time, they tend just to run the one way around because this bank is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, we run, if we run 4, we can run passing it every loop, so 2 trams in each direction. It's when we have busy periods and we've got additional buses, it suits us to operate the trams up the hill. And you can have as many trams as we possibly have when you operate like that. I think 8 is the maximum we've ever managed. And the buses, because of the way that the tram stops are laid out, it means the buses don't have to cross the path of the trams each time they come into a stop. So busy periods, we operate like that. On a normal, regular visitor day, we'll operate in both directions.
We're coming to the first passing loop. And you can hear that the radios are in operation there. Now, here there's a narrow gauge railway on the left, and there's also a colliery line, I believe, on the right.
So this section divides the museum between the 1820s and Georgian landscape, which is to the right, and then on the left is the 1950s and Edwardian landscape.
Yeah. And we can see a car coming in here, which is a Blackpool car.
It might not be possible to see on the video, but the two lines are electrically, certainly in wire, contact wire terms, independent. So the two wires that are above the tracks in the loop remain so all the way to the town and from the entrance. So they're separate wires. So it's not a trolleybus wiring system. The double wires provide a means really of balancing the voltage across the system and enabling the circuit breaker and the substation to see a fault as far away as a mile. But it creates an interesting operational feature if you have to reverse a tram, that you make sure you pick the right wire. Otherwise, when you get to the centre poles in the town, the traction poles are in the middle of the street, it can get a little bit exciting there.
I think the section of track was originally built by Beamish as a railway. And then later there was less emphasis placed on the railway and more emphasis on the tramway. I think originally there was actually two horseshoe shapes with this. There was a railway and a horseshoe, and the tramway was in a horseshoe.
We had a development director for many years who didn't like railways, which is partly why when the tramway was created, whilst they could have accommodated the railway alongside, the tramway took the precedent, and the formation was adjusted to suit.
Yes, I would imagine that a railway is more expensive to operate than a tramway.
And I think, from what I understand, it was built by cobbled staff. The gradient was too steep and the curves too sharp for the railway inspector to pass it for passenger operation. So even from the beginning, it wasn't particularly useful as a people mover.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just check? Is everybody okay with the sound? Can everybody hear? Okay. You can see on your left that it's what's called a 1950s town, which is a relatively new part. Now you can see that the railway picks up here, and we're now going to go on to a shortish section of double track tramway. And we're now coming into what is called the 1900 town. I'm not quite sure how to describe that, but there's actually sort of two loops here. I'm not sure if there's a technical term for this, but also these traction poles. I think these came out. These are Newcastle traction poles, which I think came out of the depot Biker.
I believe so. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So they are originals. Oh, second.
The crossover in the foreground originates from when the tramway terminated in the town, and the trams inbound were coming from the direction this tram's travelling in. So this was a means of reversing them. We also use them sometimes if we're doing maintenance work and we truncate the route for any reason. It just gives us some operational flexibility. That said, we do tend to run the trams out of the other end of the town and reverse them there, because swinging the boom when there's so many street lights and pedestrians and so on can be quite challenging sometimes.
I'm sure. That will, so there'll be a brief pause. Cars often pass here, but I think today they don't. And you can see on the right hand side is the railway station.
And this is the first section of tramway that was opened in 1973.
Yes.
And it went from the depot to the middle of nowhere, where there was a sign that optimistically stated, "One day there will be a town here, and this is what it will look like."
Yeah. In fact, it might be the case of when Beamish first started, those trees were incredibly small, or they weren't even there.
Yeah, they're all. I think there was some planting in the 1980s with the job creation scheme, from what I understand. Yeah. And when we try and cut them down now for any reason, we get a huge amount of objections for that.
Yes.
But it's not an ancient forest.
Yes, I can imagine.
This location's Pillar Bend, and from the left of that view is where we eventually will have a trolleybus route joining the roadway, and that would follow pretty much the tramway all the way through the site, but it deviates through the 1950s town.
Yeah. I've just turned the sound down a bit on the video. I think that's probably dropped down a bit. So a lot of these curves are quite tight. I remember coming here a long time ago with the school. Was virtually nothing there at all. Now we're coming up towards the depot. We're about 3/4 of the way through, and you can see there's now a bus depot there. The bus depot is in one of the newer sort of buildings here. We're coming up to a passing loop.
Yeah, bus depot was opened in 2019.
Yeah.
And then closed again in 2020.
Oh. And originally, this area here, that was actually terminus, I think. But we can see the Blackpool car approaching here. Paul, is there anything that you want to say about the depot?
Yes, so the site had some original features, and we call the depot area Fowlbridge, and that was the name of a farm that stood on the site. There was a farmhouse and workers' cottages. It was quite a rural place, and it was associated with what is now a big country hotel called Beamish Hall. And our farm is part of the same landscape. It was the home farm to that hall, which was owned at one point by the Shaftos, which people may be familiar with, the song Bobby Shafto has gone to sea. And as the site was developed, Beamish Hall was used as the main administrative base, and Fowlbridge was used for the practical purposes of developing the site, so construction, depots, and so on. The tramway where Blackpool 31 is stood in this view, that the tramway there onwards is actually made up ground. It was a fairly steep valley, and that is basically rubble from the terraces of Gateshead and the clearances of the 1970s that was tipped there and compacted in order to create the road and the tramway. the farm is up to the right, and the depot is just behind and to the right. And that's where we do all of the engineering work and tramcar maintenance.
We'll see a bit more of the depots quite soon, but we'll just sort of keep on going on the tour.
This section of route as well, the roadway is wired for trolleybus operation.
Yeah.
But as and when we develop the trolleybus route, we will have to put new traction poles in and segregate them rather better than they currently are. This was a piece of test overhead that enabled us to operate trolleybuses to the entrance building.
Yeah. I mean, I know there has been a couple of buses have at various points have operated here of trolleybuses, but they're not a regular occurrence. And we're now almost completing on the circle here, where we're getting back to the entranceway. Yeah, and this is the loop, and many times I've arrived here and I've also stood here when I'm about to return off to South Shields. There's actually quite a good view on the right of the colliery, which I think we've only just glimpsed here, and that is a fantastic sight. Right, now that's the journey around on the tramway, so I'm going to pause that. Now, hopefully what I'll be able to do is just skip on to the slides. Yes, so this is about the beginning. This is the beginning of Beamish and the beginnings of the tramway. That's one of the workhorses of the system. Now, I mean, as I was saying earlier, I'm no big expert on a lot of this. If we happen to have anyone here who's an expert on Gateshead or Newcastle trams, I haven't got any difficulties. If they want to be jumping in on this, so that's actually at concert. There was actually I'll just click on there. So I think hopefully that is a fairly accurate summary of how this got going. They bought two cars, Gateshead 10, which was a Gateshead car which had moved on to Grimsby. The Grimsby and Ingham line, and was identified as a car to be kept, and it was moved up to the Constant Steel Works, which is not too far from the Beamish site. I think an overhead traction wire was placed over the railway of the lines, and that's it at concert. And that's also a very early photograph. That would be just before Beamish had started. with an awful lot of people there who are fans.
I think that's George Hurst stood on the step of the tram, I think.
Yes.
Who wrote the book on Gateshead tramways.
Yes. Well, I think George did a couple of things. He did South Shields, Gateshead, I think a smaller pamphlet on Newcastle. And if Frank Bagshaw's there, did George actually buy a Newcastle car, which is now at Craig? Are your mics off, Frank? It always.
Yeah, Newcastle 102, John.
Yes.
Recently restored again to service at Crouch.
Yes. So it's a fantastic car, but there are some people who were involved at the start of the tramway. This one isn't a Beamish; it's a concert. Anyway, that's the other early car. That is the Sheffield car, which we've seen. It's in a mock color scheme for kind of Gateshead. It's BATET, which I think stands for British Electric Traction, and it's billed as number 1. Again, there's a bit of information there about that. Okay, well, I'll move on to that's the Sheffield car again. Now, I'm not quite sure where this is, but I think this is about as it's going to go into preservation.
Yeah, that's concert as well at Templetown.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So I think it arrived in that state at a concert, but there was actually structural problems on the top deck.
Yeah, I think there was always a myth that it hit a bridge, and that's why it was an open topper. But obviously, these photos disprove that. And I think it was felt an open topper would give a certain amount of excitement to passengers and so on. But enough of the top deck was retained that when it was rebuilt in the 1980s, it could be restored to its original open balcony condition using, in the main, original components.
Yeah. Okay.
Paul, is that when it came back from Clapham?
That's right. Yeah. So Gateshead 10, I don't think ever made it to Clapham. It was stored at Clay Cross.
Yeah.
And Grimsby livery, BR livery, and whereas 342 did make it down to the museum at Clapham. In fact, both trams were retained in the ownership of the nation until quite late. Only in the last sort of 25 years were they transferred. The early 2000s were they actually transferred to the museum.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple more. Now that's the start of the construction of the tramway. And there's a bit of information about it there on the left of your screen. As you've seen, all that has changed kind of completely. And there's a couple more shots of it there. Right. So that is basically just kind of construction work. And again, and that is a shot again of Gateshead 10, which is how I can remember when I was a very small boy. There was a very short bit of track, small bit of track in use, and there's a bit of information about it there. Okay, if we're okay with that, we'll be moving on. Now, that is an amazing site because that is what was there originally. This view shows just how much the site of Beamish has changed. It's looking at Foul Bridge, and Foul Bridge is pretty much the center of the operation of the tramway. And that's how it looked then. Then, as Paul was saying, it was changed into something like that. So again, that shows how much work has actually gone into the site. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll be moving on and we'll have a look at what I guess a lot of people are here for, which is actually the trams. Now, this was taken up just more than 10 years ago. This is at the 40th, I believe, Paul.
That's correct, yeah, 2013.
Yes, yes, and we've got quite a group there of cars. Okay, so Gateshead 10 is probably the principal car at Beamish. It would have some claim maybe to being one of the longest trams in public service, because it's certainly been around for a while. It's certainly been in use the bulk of its time. And there it is there in the town. There it is there, and that's beside the it was the 1820 railway going up the bank. And again, now, Paul, could you be telling us a little bit about that? Because it's green for an interesting reason.
So when Gateshead ceased to use its trams and the system closed in 1951, fairly prematurely, I think, it was still fairly successful as a tramway at that point. Several of the trams were sold to British Railways, along with a number of Newcastle single-deck bogie cars, where 10 was renumbered to 26. It was overhauled at York Carriage Works, and it went to operate on, and there is a distinction, it was the Grimsby and Immingham Electric Railway, albeit using tram cars for those services. And in the, 12 years ago, we had been under some pressure from people who like to take photographs of trams to repaint 10 into BR green. And as it was due a repaint anyway, that was an opportunity to do so. So it was both painted, we took the advertising boards off, we put the sort of fishing boat style lamps at each end, which were for running at night on the railway. And what was supposed to be a 6-month operation, it basically carried it all the way through to the point we withdrew it for a fairly significant overhaul, which it's nearing the completion of now.
Okay, that's it, and that's it out on the track. I think that's how it looks now.
It is, yes.
Right.
The bogies have been overhauled to the extent that very little of the original remains, apart from the actual frames. And there's often times where I wish we'd actually just gone the whole hog and replaced the frames as well, in order to restore some integrity back into the structure of those. It's been a very, very extensive mechanical overhaul. The body was in pretty good condition though.
Yeah, yeah.
And Paul, are they maximum traction trucks on those bogies?
They are, yeah. And in Gateshead's form, they were reversed as well.
Right. Okay. Small wheel first.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also on the left there is the Newcastle car, which we will be looking at soon. Again, that's back to the Sheffield car. Sheffield 264 is blah blah, and it was kept in use because of the war. It was on arriving at Beamish in December. It was painted in Gateshead colours, which we've seen, and then temporarily covered with an open top layout, owing to the poor condition of the upper deck structure. The tram operated in this form until 1985, when it was withdrawn for a major restoration. I believe there's also been another restoration since then.
That's correct.
Yes, and the car does look fantastic. I'm going to say it does look absolutely great. And again, it's one of the mainstays of the line. That's it again, going back to how it appeared originally. That's it in a kind of a Gateshead tramways of a colour scheme. And there it is again. I think that one's is that at the entranceway?
It is, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, and there it's in the main street. Can you just explain what's happening here, Paul? Because I know it's a slightly unusual operation.
Yeah, looking at the fashion, I would say dates that to before the full circle of the tramway was opened.
Yeah.
So the trams arrived on the road nearest to the Sun Inn on the right. Obviously, in the UK, we're on the left-hand side, and it's reversing across the crossover in order to gain the left-hand running road as it exits the town. What I don't know at the time, as I was not only just born at this period, was whether they let everybody off the tram and then the new passengers on at that point, or whether they picked passengers up at what is now the stop, which, looking at that, would be just in front of the horse-drawn vehicle on the left. It's got people on it, so I suspect they just let people off and let people on in the same place.
Now I think if you're doing that, I think what you have to do is just take everybody off the car first and then reverse. Yeah.
Our crews are very keen that everybody get off when they decide that they've terminated. There's no sort of legal reason for it. It's more of an emotional one, I think.
Okay, and there's two Sheffield cars together, and they're very different. Sheffield 513. Is Sheffield 513 still owned by Beamish, Paul?
Just about. It's it in due course won't be. It was. I mean, are you going to cover it separately, John? I don't want to steal your thunder here.
No. Honestly, fine. Yes, there'll be a bit about it here. It's in the old town there. We can see at the back there. There's some tracks which are just going into a fence. Now that is now the running line. There's quite a lot of buildings there. Now, I think I've got a little bit of information about here. Oh yes, I have. Yeah. It's a Robert's car. Frank Bagshaw probably knows a fair bit about this.
Well, yes, but you carry on, John. It's okay.
I will do. Yes, it came to Beamish. It was damaged during. So it was damaged in storage. Restoration started. Now it's currently in operation at I think it's the East Anglia. I always want to say something else, but it's at the East Anglia Transport Museum, which is a museum in the UK, which is very, very good. Yeah,
the story with this.
I'm sorry, Paul.
The story's rather lovely because Mr. Rotherer was the church organist, I think, at the cathedral in York. And
yes, he was. You're right.
And it had been preserved initially on the Middleton Railway, which was no home for trams. Very few made it out of there. I think Liverpool 869 managed to survive, didn't it? But otherwise, it wasn't a particularly good place for the trams. And it ended up at ultimately at Oxenhope on the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway.
It did.
And the story goes that it just turned up at Beamish. The tramway group who were responsible for developing the tramway came in one Saturday and it was just there in fairly poor condition. And it had new control, well, an alternative form of control put on, and it was tidied up and repainted for service, which it did, as you see in this photograph. It went to Blackpool in '85. It came back to Beamish. But once the tramway was extended and the reverse curves, which are to the right of the tram in this view, which you saw on the video, they are a curse, those curves, in terms of wearing tram tyres out as well as the track. It was really far too long in wheelbase to negotiate those with regular success. Not that it derailed, but it was wearing everything out. So it was put back on loan to Blackpool. And I've been at Beamish 20 years, and it's never been at Beamish in that time. And it went when Blackpool had ceased to have use of it. It went to the East Anglia Transport Museum, and that is where it will stay. Our long-term plan is that becomes its permanent base, in order that they can commit some funding to the next phase of its restoration.
Right, and that's the thing. Shortly after it arrived at Beamish. And that is it again out on the track. And that is it in happier days at Blackpool.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, okay. Now that's the Newcastle car. There was two big tramways in Tyneside, the Gateshead tramways, which was a private operation, and Newcastle Corporation, which was a council operation. I mean, I believe it's there were two systems, but they were integrated to a very high extent. almost to the point that it was one system, basically. But so if Beamish has a Gateshead car, it's very appropriate that it also has a Newcastle car. There's also a connection with Sheffield on this, which I think we'll probably get here. Okay, so it's one of 24-wheel open top cars. These were extensively rebuilt, and then when they were on the scrap line, they were sold off to Sheffield Corporation, who needed some extra cars, and they ran in Sheffield for some time. Then, as the system was winding down, they would they started to find use as sheds, etc. A body of one was found, and it was taken up to Beamish for restoration, where it now looks like that. Yeah, Paul, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, it was briefly in the hands of the Tyne and Wear Museum when it was collected from Scunthorpe, and there was a second, the body of which just about survived, still at the Rocks by Rail Museum. I don't think it's much longer for this world, but the running gear is ex-Porto and was adapted both in wheelbase and so on to suit 114. And it's probably a visitor favourite, not because it's an open top tram, but because it looks like an Edwardian tram, doesn't it? You know, the short canopies and livery style certainly make it look older, perhaps, than it really is.
Yeah. Okay. And there it is, there in the town section. And there is again outside the tramway waiting room in the town. And there it is again, as it is, I think, at the moment. It's under restoration.
Yes, it's currently stopped. It had a controller flashover last year, and whilst we're rebuilding the two controllers, and we're also rebuilding them such that they don't contain any asbestos components, it's having a partial repaint in order to improve its appearance. It'll also get different advertising, because 50 years of service obviously relates to events a couple of years ago now.
Right, and we'll be moving on. Now that's the Blackpool car. That's the Blackpool car, and I think we've got a bit of information about it there. Right, and my throat is going here, so I'll leave you to read that. But again, it was originally a Blackpool car, survived as an engineering car, came to Beamish. I think for a lot of the people who come to Beamish, that's what a tram should look like. That's how it came to Beamish. Paul, is there anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, so from talking to the tram group, their recollection of that occasion was the negative ground clearance. It left marks on the cobbles. It was a very, very tired vehicle, and it was eventually restored by a Manpower Services Commission scheme that the museum was part of. Those schemes across the country that the museum was taking part in, which included a new underframe and very, very substantial mechanical and bodywork, as well as rewiring it. So, but it did get briefly repainted back into green. We had an event that presented us with that opportunity. It wasn't a pure recreation of this scene, but it just acknowledged the car as an engineering vehicle, and that so many of the preserved trams we enjoy survived because they became engineering cars.
Yeah, I would love to have gotten pictures of it when it was repainted in green again, but unfortunately that was the time of the ash cloud in Iceland, and I was trapped in Spain, and so I didn't get any pictures of that. Okay, and that's again, it's the Blackpool car and one of the museum's the buses. Paul, is that an original bus or is it a replica?
It's a very, very early 90s replica, but on a 1960s Bedford VAM chassis.
Yeah.
Which is, it's actually still bodied. The the lower deck. It's quite an enduring vehicle. It's very, very hard working. And it's based on a London General omnibus company B-type, which were obviously fairly ubiquitous prior to the First World War.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of the times at Beamish I've seen it, and it tends to go up and down banks quite well.
Yeah, so the two inverted commas replicas operate on the colliery service, which doesn't lend itself to operation of 1950s buses. As the colliery set in 1913, we try and keep them to that route as they're sort of closest in date to the overall appearance of that part of the site.
Very well, crack on, and there it is, and there there it is again out in service, and the area around Beamish is fantastic. I mean, the views you can get there are really great, and I think I have a couple of Beamish in the snow, which will so at the end of the talk. Anyway, we're moving on. That's another car which is local. In Tyneside, in Tyne and Weir, there were 3 large systems. There was Newcastle, Gateshead, and also Sunderland. Now, I think there's a bit on the car there. And again, it's one which survived because it was in use as a changing room for a football team. I think there was quite a lot of restoration work on this car, but I think it still qualifies as an original tram. And again, it's quite a popular car.
Yeah, the lower saloon is original to some extent. Everything else that you can see pretty much is new. The truck is ex-Leeds. It was off 160 in one of the Horsefield cars. And I think that was the worst bits of the truck that is now under 180 at Cryche. So it's a Peckham P35.
And it's there out on the track and in the town. Oh, and again out on the track. Now that one, the car on the right, is one of the Portuguese cars. Because Paul, I believe you've got a couple of the Portuguese cars.
Yeah, so 196's story was obviously that it was brought for parts, but it was found to be in such good condition that nobody had a heart to break it up for parts. So it was eventually modified and given the identity of a Gateshead tram. Then it's now in South Shields livery. It was originally intended that it donate its parts to 114, which is sat to the left there. So another Porto car eventually was obtained for parts. For 114, 196 continues to operate today. And we've also got Lisbon 730, which was the regauged Lisbon car that was on the Birkenhead tramway until their troubles fairly recently.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's there out in South Shields the colours.
Or Minion tram, as a lot of people call it. I didn't get the reference, but apparently that's what it's referred to.
Yeah. And again, and that one is the Lisbon car.
So I think that's 2013, isn't it, when it was visiting us? But we now own that tram.
Yeah, that one came as a guest, and then it later came back to stay.
Yeah.
And again, it's out on the track there, and it's there again. I think at that point it was owned by the Merseyside. The Merseyside of people, and that is at the 40th at Beamish. Okay, and that one is also relatively new, a new arrival at Beamish, rather. It's a coal tram.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a bit of a text about it there. There was quite a few cars from Portugal came here and were used as parts, but that one will be kept by Beamish.
Yeah, it's kept as a coal car as well. It's the plan is it'll always remain as a works vehicle.
Yeah, I think someone was saying at one point it'll be a sort of driver experience car.
That was the plan, yeah, that we would try and keep the mileage on the passenger cars down a little bit by using this as in amongst the portfolio of vehicles people can drive. But because of COVID, we haven't restarted those experiences, and that's kind of left 65 without a purpose at the moment. But the controllers have been overhauled and a partial rewire undertaken, and our view was really we would try it and see what we really needed to do in terms of mechanical overhaul next.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, I should give some serious thought to that, because we do it at Crouch, and it's quite a good money earner.
It was very, very popular when we used to do it, because it was generally a sort of summer evening activity, and it was a nice bit of overtime for the staff. Yeah.
And Paul, is that the Sunderland car?
No, that I think is the one of the was it South Tyneside Tramway? It was a body, I think, that was acquired, used briefly as a shelter, and then eventually was dismantled. I can confirm this for you. That's the only photograph I've seen of it, other than the one that was in this book.
Yeah.
When we were looking for photographs of it, we couldn't find any. So yeah, I think it was South Tyneside Tramway.
Okay. If you,
and that's Balbridge at the location.
And that one is another Gateshead car. Is that the one which came from Crike?
Yeah, it's Gateshead 52. We're originally Gateshead 7, and it was the one that was damaged in a fire at Clay Cross in the 90s. And it was transferred to Beamish for eventual restoration. 2012 now.
Yeah, something like I agree.
Yeah. It gained infamy locally, and it ran away on a notorious hill in Gateshead and overturned, killing some pedestrians, including a soldier who was on leave during the First World War. So it's almost certainly none of the original tram exists. It was so heavily rebuilt. It was probably a bit of an insurance job, which carried the number forward. And eventually from 7, it became 52.
Okay, and that one is of some Glasgow subway cars, which I believe were at Beamish for some time. And I think they were broken up for spare parts.
They were, yeah. I don't know how useful they proved to be in the end in terms of spares. I don't think there was a great deal recoverable, but they, again, I think were one of those things in the 80s that seemed a good idea. But they have led to, a myth that we were going to build a subway at Beamish.
Yes.
Get down the mine.
And that is the Beamish trolley bus.
That's 1949 Sunbeam S7, known as coffin cars in Newcastle because they were narrow-bodied. It's currently on loan to the Sandhoff Transport Museum, Trolleybus Museum in Lincolnshire, where they're able to operate it. But it has run on test at Beamish, but it's always been a bit awkward because it's so big on our test run. It's very hard to manoeuvre at each end because we don't have a circle yet.
Right, now I'm going to ask Paul to be jumping in here. This is a video which was done by Beamish, which is about the movement of a Blackpool car, which was painted up in Sunderland colours. Paul, do you want to?
Yes. So when I started, it was about during the time of the kind of exodus of trams from Blackpool. And so I wasn't really established enough to go and get any for us at that time. And so a few years later, we had to sort of take advantage of other people letting us have ex-Blackpool cars. And one was the Lancastrian Transport Trust owned balloon car, 703. And they proposed that they repaint it into Sunderland livery and send it to Beamish for operation because it was very, very similar to Sunderland 99. Which was sort of conceptually or almost the same design. So we operated it for a number of years, which it did so very successfully until one of its tyres failed. So we laid it up and then received a proposal for it to go back to Blackpool. And this is the process of extracting it from the depot. So this is the horse car L53 being moved, not L53, sorry, Newcastle Gosforth 49 being moved out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing here is that we get to see some cars that are normally buried at the back of the depot. And that one is a Newcastle car or horse car.
So most of it is ex-Leamington and Warwick, but the same design was used. We had Newcastle and Gosforth 49, which was broken for parts. The useful parts have been transferred across to the useful parts of the Leamington car, and obviously, given our location, we've gone with the Newcastle and Gosforth identity. It now has staircases, but not much more progress really has been made on it since that was filmed. This shows the depot yard quite well, and the roads from left to right obviously are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 doesn't have tracking. 1 to 4 do. Road 3 has our inspection pit, and most of the maintenance is carried out there. And Road 1 has been used for restoration projects because it's segregated from the rest of the depot. You could also see Gateshead 10's bogie on a wagon there as well. So we were extremely nervous moving the tram at this point because obviously it did have a failed tyre, and the tyre failed, but complete fracture through it whilst it was sat in the depot one morning. As far as I know, it's just been unloaded at Blackpool and it remains there in just the same condition.
Yeah, because the Blackpool car was painted there as a near replica of a Sunderland car. It's not exact by any means, but it does look a little bit like one. But I think, yeah, as we were saying, it's now back at Blackpool, where I think the intention is to paint it back into the Blackpool colours.
Like all the Blackpool trams, it would be fair to say it was a very well sweated asset. You know, we probably had the last couple of years' life out of it. We also had a boat tram and a rail car. The rail car didn't run at Beamish, and that went back at around the same time. And the boat was sold by the Lancastrian Transport Trust for use in San Francisco. Just reading the comments there, yeah, Newcastle, most of the Tyneside, subsidiary Tyneside tramways were on trolley poles, whereas Sunderland did go over to pantographs, which always made them quite distinctive. We can't operate pantographs at Beamish, so everything we operate has trolley poles.
I believe that one is the Gateshead car that was damaged in a fire at Clyde.
That's correct, yeah. There is a fund towards its restoration, and very slowly we accumulate components for that day. But I'm very hopeful at some point in the next 10 years we'll tackle that, because it'll be a lovely tram when it's restored.
And that's the trolley bus going back into its home. I think we've seen the bulk of it there, so I'll just stop that there. I'll return to the slides, and we'll go on with some cars. These are what we might call the visiting cars. Now, there's a number of cars which have been at Beamish for quite some time. There's also been some that have stayed for a shorter or a longer time. Well, so we're going to have a look at them. Oh, accident. Right, there we go. So that one is a Leeds car, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's probably better known as Hull 96. It belongs to the Manchester Tramway Preservation Society. They'd painted it into Leeds livery, I think again to smarten it up prior to a full repaint, and we borrowed it for our corporations on contractors event, which was a weekend, and it ended up staying about 3 years. It really owes nobody anything. It works very, very hard for us, and everybody became very, very fond of it.
Yeah. I think it's now down at the Heaton Park tramway at Manchester.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been restored back to Hull livery.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. And then again, we're back with the Blackpool balloon, which is painted into the Sunderland the colour scheme. And there's it's there in the town. And again on the main line. And there, that one is also of interest. It's another Blackpool car. Paul, could you tell us about that one?
Yes, that was a boat car, which was again owned by the Lancastrian Transport Trust. It came to us. It only operated for a season. It arrived. It wanted very little work, so we commissioned it. It was repainted. It was almost too popular. People wouldn't get off it. And when you're operating a circular route, that's quite inconvenient in terms of transport system. But as I say, that now is in San Francisco.
Yes, so that's it. And there's again. I think there's a bit of text about it there. There's quite a few. I mean, I think there's more Blackpool boats that are not in Blackpool than there are at Blackpool now.
I think you're right, John.
That's right.
And there it is. Yeah, I believe it disappeared quite quickly off to America. I think it was sold, I believe.
It was. I think it'd be fair to say it was slightly controversial. We were the owning group said to us, basically turned around and said, it's getting sold. Do you want to buy it? And we obviously weren't in a position to. So they said, then it's going. So it went to the Market Street Railway. So it was nice while we had it.
Okay.
Yeah, say no more than that.
Okay, and that was also kind of quite a fan favourite.
Yeah, I think it was 4 days operation we did with that. That's Blackpool 11, which is one of the van back cars from the Martin route, and that is a classy vehicle. That we didn't really have good enough weather to make the most of it, and we borrowed it for a very, very short space of time. I think we would all very gladly see that one come back to Beamish.
Yeah. I mean, so it's there in the rain. I think. Oh, there's a bit of text about it there. That's it beside the railway. I think that was on a warmer day. We can see the railway there, and the van backs there as well. Yeah. Okay. Oh. And there again. That's Blackpool, the coronation, Paul.
Yeah, 304. That's came from the Tramway Transport Trust, I think. It's a very, I mean, we experienced all the challenges that Blackpool had in the 50s with that vehicle. Very, very long, wide swept path. Quite an appetite for electricity.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Again, quite a nice vehicle. Once, when it arrived, it'd come with this guy who I think was a hero of the coronations in Blackpool, and it wouldn't go up the hills. I think he'd only driven them after they'd ceased to be van back cars, so they were on conventional controllers. But once a few braver souls kept the sort of the control lever pushed right forward, it flew. It was a very, very nice tram in terms of passenger comfort and so on, but a bit difficult to integrate into the fleet. It wouldn't fit into all of the depot roads and so on, but I think it scratched an itch for a lot of people having it at Beamish.
Certainly did, yeah. It did. And that's a Blackpool standard. I can't quite remember it there, but I must have been there because I know I'd taken the picture. There's been quite a few Blackpool cars at Beamish over the years.
Yeah, and that was one of the BTS cars still. So when we'd lent them Blackpool 31, we'd kind of had dinner and discussed what might be done to sort of quid pro quo. And that was the agreement that 147 spent a season with us and was very, very successful. Effectively, it's Blackpool 31 with a roof. So, yeah, that was a very nice car, but air braked, which was different for us.
Yeah. And both cars are going in the same direction there.
Yeah, it must be an event. And 114 will be waiting for the loop in order to pick up the token.
And again, another Blackpool car.
So 280 was part of the Manchester Tramway Preservation Society collection and still is. That spent a year, 2 years with us. A little bit incongruous in terms of appearance, probably a bit modern in the rebuilt form. It was part of a former twin car set. But it fitted in well, and those trams are very good because of the low platforms. They suit visitors, for getting on and off, who perhaps struggle with the steps on the Edwardian cars. Horrendous horn. If you're familiar with the sound of these cars in Blackpool, it really didn't sound right in an Edwardian town street.
Yeah. That is an interesting car. That one is from, I always call it Birkenhead.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
arrived having hit a bridge on the way, and there were some operational challenges with this car. We had to limit its operation to series-only notches on the controller because of very thin tyres. You can just about see there just how thin those tyres are. And the worry would be too much power on the hill and you would slip a tyre. But that was part of our relationship with the Merseyside group that we borrowed that. We generally went for cars you could move on the road network more easily, such as open toppers or single deckers, rather than fully enclosed double deckers, because they're quite difficult to move around given the height of bridges and so on.
Now, I gather that is now back at, well, and it's not back, it's now at Crike.
It's at Crike now, yes, yeah.
Yes. So it has been restored to quite a high standard, I thought. I mean, I've been off to Birkenhead quite a few times, and a lot of the cars there looked absolutely great.
That one, but as Paul says, the tyres are bad on it, so it's got to have new tyres.
That was an interesting experience. That's a Manchester horse car.
Yes, L53. We've had that twice. It's taken part in horse-based events at the museum rather than tramway specific. It's got the Eads Peyton reversible body, which is an interesting feature, and sort of lent itself to the operation at Beamish. And then we horsed it using plough horses, which are used to walking sideways on the headlands when they're ploughing. So yeah, that was a really good experience. It's not one I think we'll repeat anytime soon, but certainly added some variety to the operation.
That one is at the 40th. At the 40th. Yeah. I think there was almost a guest car from all of the museum lines in the UK. Might not be quite true, but it was about that.
It was very representative. We did try for Summerley as well. It's like gauge difference, but
gauge, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the forming the procession that went through the town. Blackpool 31 only had one motor at the time, so it couldn't complete a full lap because it wouldn't go up the hills. But it sort of staggered out in order to join in for the occasion.
And that's a guest car. It's a Glasgow car. Is that from Crike, Frank?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's Paisley 68, really.
That was good fun because I think it's still motored for when it was a fully enclosed car. So
yes, it was. Yeah,
quite a lively vehicle. It suited the hills well.
Okay, and it's out there now. That's the Manchester, the California car.
Yep, it is.
That's visited us twice. We've had it on a short visit, and then we had it for a season.
Yeah,
looks the part on site. Operationally, a little tricky when you've got conductors on the rear platform because they can't gain access to the saloon. So you either have to have them waddle around on the sideboards, or you have to double conductor that vehicle.
That one was. So that's a car that wasn't a Beamish for very long.
Yeah, that's the rail car that came to us. It was donated, but we donated it back. The plan had been to restore it back to as-built condition, and we also looked at whether it was possible to adapt it to take wheelchairs on. But in the end, it returned to Blackpool, where it has been recommissioned and is operational, I think, at the moment.
Oh, yeah, and there's a bit of a text about it there. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll be moving on. Now, I think I'm pretty much at the end of the talk. Now, there's just a couple of nice shots at Beamish in the snow. I was actually quite surprised that the site didn't get that after it started to snow, that you didn't close the site, but I'm extremely happy that you didn't, because I got some fantastic pictures there in the snow. So Roberto, a couple of slides which are just taken in Beamish. It's as I said, it's right out in the country. There's some fantastic sort of grounds around there. That's a great place to go to. So I'm just about to finish now, I think. Paul, is there anything else that you'd to say?
No, it's nice seeing it, seeing it through someone else's eyes, I've got to admit.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. And again, that's a Sunderland car out approaching the town.
Can you hear your voice?
I'm sorry. And that's a few of the drivers in the snow. And as it's well after 5 o'clock, I think it's time to close. So thank you for coming, and that's the end. So Roberto, I'll pass back to you. Thank you.